There are very few tasks in bushcraft that can be accomplished without the aid of a good sharp knife. You could, in an emergency, use a piece of broken glass or a flint, but a good, well-made knife definitely helps you a lot.
I cut myself a slice of time when the wind blows, when the river meets the sea.
Now, the knife I would choose for bushcraft would be something like this. About a 4-inch blade. You don't need a big Rambo knife with a 9-inch blade and a sawback edge and a hollow handle. No use at all. Something like that's far more useful. Also, I'd go for carbon steel. Now, carbon steel, although it will rust if you get it wet, it definitely holds a better edge and it's much easier to sharpen, so that's a really good plus point. A good solid handle. Wood is nice. You can also have antler. Anything that's comfortable, that's the number one. Even synthetics are a good idea, as long as it fills your hand and it's comfortable to hold in a lot of different positions, that's great. It also has a full-length tang. Now, a tang is the piece of metal that runs through the handle, and you can see that it runs all the way to the end here. A lot of cheap knives, the tang only comes about this far, which is inevitably going to be a weaker knife. Another thing, I would always go for a knife with a single beveled edge. Now, single beveled means that from the flat part of the blade here to the edge, you have a single change of angle. And this is very important for bushcraft. A lot of knives you'll buy, especially butcher's knives and general purpose knives, will have a 2 beveled edge, which means that from the flat part here, you have one change of angle, and then just before the edge, you have an extra change of angle. That makes all the difference. A single beveled edge can be sharpened to an absolute razor sharpness, sharp enough to shave the hairs on your arm. And for bushcraft, that's exactly what you need. Another thing that's really important is to have a good case. So the knife you choose should always come with a very good case. It can be made of leather, plastic, even wood, as long as it does the job of keeping your knife safe. If the case isn't up to the job, it could come through and you could injure yourself. So always make sure, as well as checking the knife over, have a really good look at the case and see that it's up to the job. There are several ways that we'll use a knife, but we're just going to look at a few to begin with. Now, these are the very basics. What I want to do is make a point on this stick. So treating this stick as if it's a tent peg, what I'd like to do is make a point. So I'll take my knife and I'll hold it in this very firm fist grip, and I keep my arm almost locked out. Now, the reason I do that is because I don't want this to move. This arm stays where it is, so the knife stays in exactly this position. Now I put the blade right on the piece of wood where I'd like to start cutting, and I pull. I'm actually using my left arm and I'm pulling backwards. Very much like this. This gives me a huge amount of power and a lot of control over the blade. Because the blade isn't moving, it means that I can maintain the angle that I want to keep. If I do it this way, I'm constantly changing angle. Another point about carving, jarring the elbow like this, is it can cause you to have tennis elbow. Something I did to myself years ago before anyone showed me a better way of doing it. So save yourself a lot of pain and carve this way. And as you can see, I've got a huge amount of control over that blade, and I can just keep turning the piece of wood, taking very small shavings off as I go. And there we have it, that's a point. Right, another thing we might want to do is to make a notch, especially if this is to be a tent peg. I need a notch so that the piece of string I tie to, or the tent guy lines, won't come undone. So I hold the knife in a slightly different way. This time I put my thumb on the back of the blade. My other thumb goes in front, and using both thumbs, I push. So I'm pushing the blade and taking very fine slivers of wood away as I go. You notice that every time I cut, I'm cutting away from myself. At no time will you see me cutting in the direction of my hand. And there we have a notch. Now, a notch can be useful for anything from making a pot hanger to hold a billy can over a fire to make a cup of tea, a tent peg, as we have here, or it can be used as the trigger mechanism for a trap, in which case we would link two of these together and use that to make the trap, something we'll cover later on in the series. Another technique, which I'm going to have to go down low for, is to hold the knife in the soft part. So if you feel where your kneecap is, and you'll feel a soft section just below. If you put the back of your knife into that soft section, then it gives you a lot of control. You can actually use that knife in a much more controlled way, and you can peel the bark, you can make feather sticks, and the knife doesn't move. It's all under the control of your knee. There you go. Those are 3 very useful techniques for carving using a knife. There are lots more, but if you can master those few, you'll definitely be a long way to becoming a good bushman.
Cut myself a slice of time when the wind blows, when the river meets the sea.